And now, from the Bell Lifestyle Studio, here's Mike.
It is 7:41. Newstalk Sauga 960 Raw. Mike Richards, and I believe we're all here. A little bit of a electronic tap dancing for the last couple of minutes. When you do things remotely, sometimes at the station, the gerbil gets tired, and when that happens, the wheel stops, and then red wine starts coming out of the faucets. So we had to do something, or whatever the hell's going on back there. I don't know, but we seem to. We see, that's going as well as people's brackets, I suppose. Clark, as Clark Judge joins us here from the Talk of Him Network, I'm like, Florida Atlantic, San Diego State, Miami, Florida, Connecticut. What tournament is that you're talking about? Is that one of those tournaments in the Bahamas before the season starts?
It's funny, Mike. My extended family, my brother and his sons, and then my sister and her kids, they do a tournament, a bracket. So there are like 20 people involved. Well, the person who's going to win is my brother's wife, who hasn't watched 1 second of college basketball. And she has San Diego State and UConn in the Final Four.
Oh, my God.
She's the only one. And so I went, how did she do it? She goes, I just like the names.
Yeah, well, it's kind of how it works out, folks. I mean,
it's unreal. That's why I follow the women's game. Did you watch Caitlin Clark last night?
See, you sound like my dad does. My dad calls me every day. I go, Dad, I haven't seen it.
You got to watch her. I mean, she is Wonder Woman. She is unbelievable.
That's what my father says, but I haven't had a chance. I'm just because in sports, in sports radio, which is it sort of is, you have to appear to know everything, right? So there's this appearance of ego, and it's so funny. You see this all the time on television and the ESPNs and Fox or whatever, and all these know-it-alls and the breakdown on fantasy sports, and their wives should be picking, based on the names that they like, because when it comes down to it, sometimes it is that, and boy, oh boy, I'll tell you, that is, I do like to see the excitement on the kids' faces. Like I mean, there is something, and I think it was up here. Jack Armstrong is one of our analysts who also does the Raptors. But he's a Brooklyn guy away, or Queens. He's New York guy way back.
The All-American boy, Jack Armstrong.
Yeah, and he does a tremendous job. And he said, folks, in talking about one of the games yesterday, I think it was the Creighton game. He goes, this was a great collegiate game. Like those that watch the pro game, sometimes they look at it and they don't quite understand. It really is a different universe. It's a different world. Yeah. And Clark, a lot of times I talk about, those that watch NCAA football and then what it is in the pro game. And sometimes they just don't, it's like they don't translate unless your program is geared as such where you play an NFL style, let's say, offense, and you do things with players of a certain size, because you can win the WAC or the MAC or do all these things with guys who really don't play NFL style. And therefore, some of the biggest names that we've ever seen at the collegiate level aren't even considered. I mean, Drew Timmy or Jaime Jaquez or any of those guys. They may not go pro at all, because the game is played so differently with a certain size athlete, and there's just a certain, generally a fit of body that goes pro, and some that don't, and that's a hard line in the sand, but it is true.
Yeah, and I think the real attraction too is what you're talking about here with the Final Four. I mean, there are teams that come out of the woodwork at this time of year, and you never saw it coming. You didn't see it coming, and with the pro sports, that's generally not the case, where you suddenly find somebody that's 9 and so I'd say 9 and 7. Those are the old days, 9 and 8. But in football, for instance, or in the NBA game, now I go way back in '69 when the Celtics were the 4th best team in their division, and they won the NBA because they had Bill Russell. You don't lose if you have Bill Russell. But that's so rare. But when you see that the college game, anything's possible. Princeton's in the final 16. I'm here, I watch Princeton against Yale. I go, they're pretty good. In the final 16, geez, I mean, that's an extraordinary, and it's fun to see, and it's gratifying to see those kids get that chance to participate at that level. And I think you're right about that, Mike. And that's the joy of the college game is it's so unpredictable, and there's a different atmosphere about it. There's an electricity that you don't think you really see in the pro sports.
No, and it's why my father's always been. No, he's a high school coach, a long time high school coach, but collegiate sports, both football and especially basketball, were always his attraction. In fact, he literally has no interest in pro and NBA at all.
I don't either. I used to follow it religiously. I have no interest.
He has no interest.
And I have no interest in the WNBA. I love the women's college game. And I realized last night when I was watching it why. There was an article in Sports Illustrated about 20 years ago saying that the pro game should actually, or the college basketball, the men's game actually, should be 4 players, not 5, because they've gotten so big, they just clog the court. And you realize that when you're watching, if you watched any of those men's games this weekend, I mean, it's fouls. Everyone's running to each other. It's physical. You watch the women's game, it's much more spread out. They're smaller players. It's a cleaner game. There are not many fouls, and it's just a more fluid game. Now, people can say, well, they miss a lot of shots and everything. Well, I'd say, as I said, watch Caitlin Clark. I mean, she's Pistol Pete with a ponytail. I mean, she can do everything. She can do everything. And so, but I'm sort of like with your dad. I love the pro game. And then it became a lot of one-on-one play and people turning their back and 4 people watching them. And I went, no, thanks. I'm not thanks.
It's not basketball to me. It ends up being this kind of all-star format.
Yeah, that's right.
If they could play at the Y, that's what it would look like. And I don't.
And 130 points. I want to see defense too and everything, and you see that in the college game. And I just think the college game is much more interesting. It's fun, especially this time of year, because of exactly what you open the program with. You have no idea who's getting to the top. It's a crapshoot, and it's fun.
I think it's why when I see someone, at the collegiate level do well at the pro level in the NFL, I kind of like it. Like I like the fact that you now have these, quite frankly, like really good athletes at quarterback that are like point guards. They're no longer the statue, the 6'4" guy that just hangs in the pocket. Not that that's not effective, or not that there haven't been great athletes who have done that, but that's why I think, and I see what Mike Tomlin talking about, how excited he is about Kenny Pickett and this year coming up. And so am I. I mean, these young quarterbacks, and he is of that group that I find that, look, Pitt used to be a dominant big time program. It's still of some significance, but it's not SEC football. It's not that kind of stuff. And to see him do something that fits everything that Pittsburgh thinks of, boy, I sure hope he has a good year.
Yeah, no, well, you sound like a Steelers fan. Yeah, I think a lot of people do. But that's why I like Roethlisberger. I loved him. I will be honest with you. I loved him because he was a linebacker dressed as a quarterback who played exceptionally well and knew how to win games. He just knew how to win games, and he made big plays. He didn't have the greatest of statistics in terms of when you're talking about completion percentages or yards, that sort of thing, but he did okay. And he just won twice as many games as he lost. But when you talk about those guys come out of nowhere, I think of a guy like Steph Curry. I mean, to Davidson. I wanted to go to Davidson when I was a kid. I mean, I really did. It was small school.
Really?
Oh yeah. Because and way back when they had Lefty Driesell as their coach. I ended up covering Lefty Driesell at the University of Maryland. And that he is a piece of work. That was an experience. I was a young guy, and that was an experience. It was an education because he had been around the block and everywhere, and a zillion stories. And boy, if he thought you were wrong, he let you have it. And he let me have it one time, and I stood there and took it. And I think he respected it. And we got to know each other pretty well after then. But he was a character.
Well, and I think too, in understanding reporting, and I've seen it up close a couple of times, where you must learn at an early age that even people that you respect and you cover and you do all those things, that there may be a moment of disagreement or being dressed down.
No question.
And the hardest thing I think in your job, and you've done it for an incredibly long period of time, is to not only be able to take it, but take it with a sense of, I guess the word I would use is professional dignity.
Right.
So you can show up the next day and still do your job and not have it be personal. I think that's going to be very challenging.
You're right, Mike, because when you're covering a beat, and I was covering the Chargers for years, the Colts, and then the 49ers, and the 49ers when they were in the Super Bowls and everything. And you go in the locker room every day. You have to face those guys every day. So if you criticize them, you got to be there. You have to be there, because if you don't, they look at you and they say, oh, he's ducking me. And I'll never forget, I went into the locker room once and I'd written something about the 49ers offensive line, and the position groups are all together. So the offensive linemen are all together. The quarterbacks are together. The running backs are together. So I go over that offensive line group, and there was a guy named Kevin Gogan who was over there. Kevin Gogan was a tough guy, could be profane, but really tough. And what I learned at an early age was professional athletes respect people who stand up and believe in what they believe and stand by it. They stand by it. So he took me on and said, I saw what you wrote. Don't like it. We don't like it. Let me have it. And I said, that's fine. You and I disagree, but I would say it again. And I'll tell you, Kevin, I believe it, and we'll see how it goes. And we had a long conversation, and I said, okay, fine. Start to turn around. And he said, hey, wait a minute, come back here. You can come here every day because you didn't back down. You didn't try to pass it off as always somebody's mistake or as a bad headline. You stood by what you said. And we respect guys who stand up and stand by what they say. So I may not like what you said, but at least you defended it, and you defended it reasonably. You come back here. He and I became pretty good friends over the years, actually. But that's the sort of thing. And I've seen it the other way. Well, where guys, I'm sorry, someone put words in my, no, I didn't. No, you said it, you wrote it, it's there. Now have a conviction. If you wrote it, you must believe it. So stand there and defend it. If you don't, leave, because you got to keep coming back each day.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The one time I saw it up close, I was doing mornings at the Fan, and it was with Bob McCallum actually at the time. And Don Cherry had a show called The Grapevine. He did with a guy named Brian Williams, who went coast to coast. It ran, and Steve Simmons is someone who's up here who writes a lot of things, and he writes in that manner. He's one of the few guys, I would say, in Canada, but certainly in Toronto, who will voice his opinion that might be incredibly unpopular. So a lot of guys don't like Steve.
Right.
But he will be there the next day, and he wrote something about some coach that had come up, I think, from the minor leagues. It was someone that had just come to the league, or someone who had just lost the job, and whatever it was, Steve must have said something. It's not that it's derogatory, but he just felt this guy wasn't very good. Well, Grapes is walking down the hallway with his wild, workout leopard pants or whatever it was, and the big leather jacket or whatever. And I know him quite well. I mean, I've always been very close to Don, but Don is going to. So I'm caught in the middle between Steve Simmons standing in the hallway and Grapes coming up to see me. He goes, "They talk you for a second," and he just starts going at him like an umpire would over a call at home plate that he didn't like face to face. And I'm literally crouched down between them. And as he's laying into Steve, like, and there's a blue streak coming out of his mouth, he looks down, like at his shoes where basically my face is. He goes, "Hey, how you going? How's it going, Mikey boy?" And then he goes right back and starts yelling at him. But Steve took it. He voiced his, and then the next day, I know he'd be right back in that dressing room. And I do respect that. I know a lot of people in the city, because he'll say things that aren't popular with the Leaf Nation. He's not going to say if he thinks the defense or the goaltending's weak or the coach did a bad job, he will say it. That has made him unpopular in this city.
It's a tough spot to be in, Mike, because you don't want people not to like you. You don't really, and some of the things that they say hurt, but if you believe it and you think it's true, and it is true, you write it or you say it. And I never forget when I was the last year I was in San Diego. I wasn't covering the Chargers. I was sort of covering the league, and then they asked me to go out and do a rainy day story Tuesday because players were off. Well, I got Anthony Miller, who was a wide receiver then, and we were talking about everything. And all of a sudden, he talked about how we wanted to go to Denver to play with John Elway, and with free agency coming up, I think it was '93. And it was the first year free agency. He really was interested in that. So I wrote that story and became a news story. And so I went out there a couple of days later, and someone said, "Hey, did you hear what the coach said about you?" And I went, No, I didn't. He goes, "He was ripping you." He said, "I consider the source when, that story came out." And a guy who'd been a longtime writer, as a friend of mine, said, "You've got no choice here. You've got to go confront that coach today at practice." So I did. Waited practice, and I talked to him afterwards. I said, "I heard you had something to say about me." And he said, yeah. And said, "You said consider the source." And he said, "Yeah, I know." And said, I thought that was unfair. And he said, "Well, you shouldn't have said what you did." And I said, "I didn't say it. Anthony Miller did. And I've got the tape here and you can listen to it." "I don't want to listen to it," he said. And I went, "Well, you should." "No, I don't want to listen to it." He said, "You should have come to me." I said, "Why should I have come to you?" "Because we're all family." I said, "I'm sorry. I'm not part of your family. I'm here to cover your team." And from that moment on, he and I, we bonded. I'm telling you, we bonded. We talk even today, but he respected the fact that I went back to him and said, "I'm not hiding here. I want to hear you. I want you to hear my side of the story." And he never, ever wanted to listen to that tape because that's what Anthony Miller said. But anyway.
Interesting stuff. I mean, I as people can hear, and this is one of the reasons I love having you on, is that the breadth of experience is what is missing today in almost all of sports radio. They want to talk, and look, I get the gambling aspect of it, but it seems like all the shows and stations just sound the same, and they're going to spout off if they had the over and under the total. Right. What about the game itself, and then those things that are around the game, like where you get information around the game, how that works? And that's what we did here this morning. I find it fascinating.
Well, that's why I love talking to you, because you can talk about anything. You really can talk about anything. Now, I'm trying to broaden your horizons by talking about Caitlin Clark. All right, so I'm trying to broaden that. One of these days, you can wake up to Iowa basketball. I can't talk about UConn basketball.
I get it from you on the radio. I get it from my dad on the phone.
Well, I'm probably as old as your dad, but anyway. But I love talking to people who respect that. And last thing, because I know you're in a hurry, but I saw a video on Twitter last week, and it was Archie Manning. And it was Archie Manning trying to escape the pocket. He's running backwards, and he takes the ball and throws it underhanded as far as he can, just underhanded, about 20 yards down the field, caught, and forgotten who it was, but it might have been the wide receiver. Anyway, for the Oilers, Houston Oilers, goes about 20 yards down the field. It was just this extraordinary play. If that happens today, it's the greatest play ever. Nobody had ever seen it. And I said, well, I thought Patrick Mahomes invented this play. No, it was Archie Manning. And you saw that all the time when he was at Ole Miss, when he was at New Orleans, when he was at Houston. It was great. It was really a lot of fun. It was Mike Renfro made the catch anyway. That's it.
Well, it's one of those things where of a certain generation, they think everything was invented.
That's right.
During that generation. And when you played for the Saints in those days, which Archie, I mean, as I've heard time and time again, he might have been the best of quarterbacks who have ever played the game. He just played on real bad teams.
Yeah, but when he was in college, I had never seen anything like that in college. And I still say the greatest college quarterback ever. So I thought was Archie Manning anyway.
Oh, that's fantastic stuff. Clark, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again very, very soon.
You got it, Mike, and tell your dad, keep on rooting for Caitlin Clark.
That is Clark Judge from the Talk of Fame Network. Great time this morning, as it always is. Very interesting stuff.